Emma Walker never thought a single evening could turn her quiet Vermont life upside down. She had always been the calm one, the steady one, the woman who knew how to smile through long days and even longer silences. But that late autumn evening, with the sky turning a deep blue and the wind brushing lightly against the windows, she felt something she had been avoiding for months, loneliness settling deep in her chest. Her husband. Jason had left that morning for yet another business trip. He didn't say much as he packed, only murmured something about meetings and deadlines. When he kissed her goodbye, his lips barely touched her forehead. It wasn't cruel. It was simply distant, like he was already somewhere else, living in a world where she no longer fit. Emma spent most of the day trying to distract herself: laundry, dishes, organizing drawers that didn't need organizing. But every small task only reminded her of how quiet the house felt without him. She tried watching a movie, but even the sound of the TV felt empty. By the time the sun set, she found herself sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the wall. This wasn't sadness exactly. It was something softer but heavier. A sense that the life she once loved was slipping away quietly. Inch by inch. Then came the knock. It was sharp, but not aggressive. Just enough to make her blink out of her thoughts. She hesitated for a moment, wondering who would be visiting at this hour. Most neighbors didn't come by unannounced, and she wasn't expecting anyone. The knock came again, a little louder this time, when she opened the door. She was met with three familiar faces: Finn, Mark, and Daniel, her husband's closest friends since college. They were all standing on her porch, jackets damp from the light rain, their breath visible in the cold air. She hadn't seen them together in months. "Emma," Ethan said softly, his tone gentle in a way that surprised her. "We were in the area. Can we come in for a minute?" Before she could answer, she saw the concern in Mark's eyes. "You okay? You look tired." Daniel gave her a warm, almost protective smile. "We didn't want you being here alone tonight." Their presence was unexpected, but not unwelcome. She stepped aside almost automatically. "Of course. Come in." The moment they entered, the house felt different, brighter, warmer, alive. They brought in the smell of rain, cold air, and something comforting she hadn't felt in months. Company. Ethan hung his coat neatly and went straight to the kitchen like he already knew where everything was. Mark shook off water from his hair and placed a bag of snacks on the counter. Daniel closed the door carefully, so he didn't want to let the cold wind disturb her home. "Emma," Ethan called from the kitchen. "You've barely eaten, have you?" He said it as if he already knew the truth. She sighed lightly. "I wasn't in the mood." He nodded without judgment. "Let us take care of that." It felt strange to watch someone else move around her kitchen with such ease, but in a comforting way. Like she was finally sharing space with people who noticed the things she didn't say out loud, while Ethan made tea. Mark and Daniel joined her in the living room. They didn't ask intrusive questions. They didn't push her to talk. They simply sat with her, their presence filling the quiet corners of the room. "You don't have to pretend you're fine," Mark said gently after a moment. His voice had a softness she rarely heard from him. "We know Jason's been busy. We see it too." Daniel nodded. "You look like you're carrying everything alone." The words struck her harder than she expected. No one had said anything like that in months. She felt her throat tighten, but she forced a smile. "I'm okay. Just tired." But Ethan, now holding 4 mugs of tea, responded before she could take another breath. Being tired is not the same as being okay. Emma didn't know why, but she felt the sting of tears behind her eyes. She wasn't the type to break easily. But something about the way they looked at her kind, steady, genuinely worried, made the weight she had been ignoring suddenly feel too heavy. She sat down, holding the mug with both hands, letting the warmth sink into her palms. The three of them sat across from her, their expressions soft. "Jason's been distant," she admitted quietly. "He's stressed, busy. I get it. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like I'm invisible." Ethan leaned forward. "You're not invisible. Not to the people who care," Mark added. "You're one of the most considerate people we know. You hold everything together. But even strong people get tired." Daniel nodded slowly. And you're allowed to say it out loud. Emma wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to people seeing her clearly. She swallowed, trying to keep her emotions steady. I didn't want to complain. You're not complaining, Ethan said. You're being honest. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the rain tapping softly against the windows. And in that quiet, Emma felt something she had forgotten: connection. A simple human connection that wasn't demanding anything from her. The conversation shifted after a while. They talked about movies, music from their younger days. It's the first time Jason had introduced them to her, silly memories from their college years. The mood became lighter. She laughed at stories she had never heard before. She listened as they teased each other, each one bringing a different energy into the room. Ethan with his calm wisdom, Mark with his easy humor, Daniel with his quiet warmth. Around them, the house felt alive again, but beneath that comfort, Emma felt a small twist in her chest, something she couldn't fully name. Not attraction, not romance, something gentler. A feeling that came from being truly seen after months of emotional distance. It was disorienting and comforting at the same time. As the evening deepened, the rain outside grew heavier. The wind pressed against the windows, making the small house feel like a protected shelter. Ethan placed a blanket around Emma's shoulders without saying a word. It wasn't intimate. It wasn't suggestive. It was simply considerate. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel offered her a soft smile. You deserve a little warmth. She didn't respond, but the words stayed with her. Just then, the lights flickered once. The wind howled louder. Mark stood up and checked the side door to make sure it was locked. The storm was getting stronger. We'll stay until it calms, Ethan said. No point in driving in this? Emma nodded. She didn't want them to leave yet anyway. But then, as she was about to speak, something happened that made her heart jolt. The front door rattled, loud and sharp, like someone had grabbed the handle and tried to twist it open. All three men instantly looked toward the sound. Ethan stood first, his back straight. Daniel moved closer to Emma instinctively, placing himself slightly in front of her. Mark stepped toward the hallway, his eyes narrowed, listening for movement. The door rattled again, this time more forcefully. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't afraid exactly, but confused. No one should be here. No one was expected. And the storm outside was too heavy for casual visitors. Then came the third rattle, slow, deliberate, as though the person outside knew exactly how much tension it was causing inside the house. Mark whispered, "Someone's out there." Emma's heart pounded. Ethan reached for the handle but hesitated for a moment, listening, assessing. The wind outside whistled, rain hitting the porch in heavy sheets. Then dashed silence, a heavy, unsettling silence. Emma didn't realize she had been holding her breath until Ethan unlocked the door and pulled it open with one smooth motion. What she saw made her chest tighten instantly. Standing on the porch, soaked to the bone, breathing heavily as if he had run the whole way, was Jason, her husband, the man who wasn't supposed to be anywhere near home. Jason's eyes widened as he looked inside, seeing Ethan, Mark, and Daniel standing protectively around her. His gaze dropped to the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. His face tightened, not in anger, but in something far more complicated. Something like shock, confusion, and something she couldn't read. "Emma," he said, rain dripping from his hair. "What's going on?" And just like that, the night that had begun with quiet loneliness was no longer quiet at all. Everything had changed. The sudden appearance of Jason on the porch left the room heavy with tension. The three friends froze for a moment, their eyes flicking between Emma and her husband, unsure of how he would react. Emma's heart pounded. She hadn't expected him to come home early, especially in such a rush, soaked from the rain and looking completely exhausted. Every thought she had tried to push aside now returned, sharp and confusing. What would he think of her letting his friends in? Of the evening that had already shifted something inside her? Jason stepped into the house slowly, dripping water onto the polished hardwood floor. I left the conference early," he said, his voice strained, raw with exhaustion. I needed to come back. I've been thinking. About us? Emma felt a lump in her throat. The words, so simple and yet so heavy, carried months of absence and unspoken longing. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything. But her voice seemed small against the storm of emotions in the room. Ethan, Mark, and Daniel, sensing the delicate moment, moved toward the door. They didn't leave immediately, but they gave Jason and Emma space without saying a word. Their presence, which had been comforting for Emma earlier, now felt like a silent shield, making the tension more bearable. Jason's eyes, dark and tired, scanned the room before settling on her. I didn't know you'd had company," he said slowly, a mixture of surprise and something softer lingering in his tone. Why? Why are they here? Emma held the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She could see the fatigue in his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of everything he had left unsaid. "They came to check on me," she whispered. I didn't know you were coming home." Jason ran a hand through his wet hair, shaking his head as if trying to clear the confusion. "I shouldn't have left you alone," he admitted quietly. "I didn't realize how much it was affecting you." There was no anger in his words, no accusation, just exhaustion and honesty. And that honesty struck Emma in a way she hadn't felt in months. She wanted to shout, to cry, to tell him every feeling she had held back. But instead, she found herself simply standing there, letting him see her as she truly was. Ethan cleared his throat softly. "Jason, she's been carrying so much on her own. We just wanted to make sure she was okay. That's all." Jason nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "I see that now." He paused, looking around the living room at the friends he had trusted for years, and then back at Emma. "I see her now, too." Emma felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. She had wanted him to notice her feelings, to understand the distance that had grown between them. But seeing it acknowledged, even quietly, brought tears to her eyes. She swallowed, forcing herself to stay composed. Jason took a step closer. "Emma, I'm sorry. I've been distant. I've been elsewhere, and I didn't realize how lonely you must have felt. I should have been here." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I didn't need grand gestures, Jason. I just needed you to notice me, to be here." He reached for her hands, their fingers brushing lightly. The touch was gentle, tentative, but it carried all the emotion that words couldn't hold. "I see you now," he said. "I promise I'll do better. I want to do better." The friends, sensing the private moment, quietly moved toward the door. Daniel lingered for a moment, giving Emma a soft, encouraging look. "You two still have something worth saving," he said quietly, almost to himself, then nodded to the others and followed them out into the rain. The house felt silent afterward, but it was a calm, expectant silence. Emma and Jason stood there, facing each other across the living room, the storm outside providing a quiet soundtrack to the moment. The room no longer felt empty or tense. It felt hopeful. Jason let out a deep breath, his forehead resting lightly against hers. "Can we start again?" he asked. "I mean, really start again?" Emma felt warmth spreading through her chest. She had been waiting for this. Not for perfect words, not for flawless actions, but for a moment of honesty, of presence. "Yes," she whispered, "but only if we walk toward each other this time. Not away." He nodded, pulling her into a gentle embrace. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was quiet, emotional, and real. She rested her head on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. It was a rhythm she had missed, a rhythm that made the house feel like home again. The rain outside slowed, pattering softly against the windows, as if the world itself was acknowledging the moment. They stayed wrapped in each other's arms, neither speaking, both letting the silence carry the weight of what had been unsaid for months. After a while, Jason stepped back slightly, holding her hands in his. "I know I can't change the past," he said, "but I want to be present. I want to listen, really listen. And I want to make up for lost time." Emma nodded, feeling tears sting her eyes. "That's all I've ever wanted," she said softly. to be seen, to be heard, and to be with you, not just physically, but in every way. They moved toward the couch, sitting down together, still holding hands. For the first time in months, the conversation flowed naturally, without the weight of distance pressing down on them. They talked about small things at first: dinners they wanted to cook, movies they had missed, plans for the weekend. But gradually, the conversation grew deeper. They spoke of fears, of insecurities, of the quiet doubts that had crept into their marriage. Jason admitted how overwhelmed he had felt with work, how he hadn't realized that in his pursuit of providing for them, he had drifted away from the very person he loved most. Emma shared her own struggles, the moments of loneliness that had seemed unbearable, and the longing she felt for connection, for attention, for understanding. As they spoke, the emotional distance that had built up over months began to dissolve. Each word, each touch, each shared memory brought them closer. They laughed softly at mistakes they had made, forgave each other quietly, and held on to this simple understanding that they were both trying. Both imperfect, both human. Hours passed without notice. The storm outside had cleared completely, leaving a calm, crisp night in its wake. The air smelled faintly of rain and pine, and the house felt warm, safe, and full of new possibilities. Jason looked at Emma, his eyes reflecting the faint light of the lamps. "I don't want to lose us again," he said. "I don't want to take anything for granted." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. "Then let's promise to notice each other always, even in small moments, even when life gets busy. Let's promise to keep talking, keep listening, and keep holding on." He nodded, pulling her into another embrace, longer this time. Their hearts beat together, slowly synchronizing, like two pieces of a puzzle that had finally found their fit. The night stretched on, filled with quiet conversation, gentle laughter, and the comfort of knowing they were together again. The three friends who had arrived unexpectedly that evening had left behind more than tea and snacks. They had reminded Emma of her own strength, of the importance of support, and ultimately, of the bond she shared with Jason. When they finally said goodnight, the house was calm, filled with the soft glow of the lamps and the lingering warmth of togetherness. Emma stood by the window, watching the moonlight reflect off the wet streets, feeling a renewed sense of hope. Jason came up behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming back, for being here." Jason pulled her close, resting his chin on her shoulder. "No," he said, "thank you. For waiting, for being patient, for trusting me even when I didn't realize it. I promise. This is the start of something better." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the truth in his words. The night had begun with an unexpected visit, with three friends stepping in to offer support. It had ended with her husband standing beside her, fully present, fully committed, and fully aware of what mattered most. The house was quiet, but inside, Emma felt a storm of emotions settle into calm. Love had been tested. Distance had been faced. Loneliness had been acknowledged. And in that acknowledgement, a new beginning had begun. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Life would still be busy, storms would still come, and challenges would arise. But for the first time in a long time, Emma felt that they could face it together. Stronger, closer, and more in tune than ever before. As Jason held her hand and they looked out at the quiet, moonlit street, Emma realized that letting the three friends in had been more than an act of kindness, had been a catalyst for honesty, healing, and a love that was finally being seen and understood. For Emma and Jason, the night wasn't just about weathering a storm outside. It was about weathering the storm inside together. And for the first time in months, the future felt bright, full of promise, and ready to be embraced.